what's up guys? My name is Zach and today I am driving a 1974 Lincoln Continental Mark IV. Up front is a 7.5 liter V8 and down below is a 3-speed automatic transmission. Now I am super excited to be driving this Lincoln Continental Mark IV for two reasons. First of all, this is my first Malaise era review of 2024. Very excited to get back into this era of cars, my favorite era of cars. So I'll have a lot to talk about, but the second reason is the fact that I've driven the Mark V, and it's interesting to now take a little bit of a step back into the Mark IV to see what changed between the early 70s and the late 70s. But if you would like to submit your own vehicle, you can head on over to my website, zackpradel.com/submit. It's a quick and easy submission form. It takes under a minute to fill out, and I come out to you. But let's get back to that 460 under the hood. That's right, it's a 460 cubic inch V8, making somewhere in the mid 200s of horsepower. Now this is an oil crisis car, and we'll talk a lot about that later on. So horsepower numbers weren't very big, even though the engines were. Now the 460 was the only option during the entire run of the Mark IV Continental. This was the only engine you can get, and the 3-speed was the only transmission you could get. Later on that changed for the Mark V, but for the Mark IV, just the 7.5 liter 460 V8. Like I said, paired to it is a 3-speed automatic transmission known as the C6 transmission. It's pretty stout, pretty reliable according to all the people that I've talked to that have had vehicles with the C6, and it's decently enjoyable. It shifts and I have no complaints. However, like the engine, I was figuring, oh, this is probably a pretty short-lived transmission. You know when they canceled the C6 transmission that's in this car? 2004! 2004! They used these in the E-Class vans all the way up until nearly the mid-2000s. The C6 transmission outlived the show Friends. I mean, what a wacky thing to do, but I guess if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Last but not least, this Continental is rear-wheel drive, and throughout this era, all the Continentals were rear-wheel drive. So how does it feel to drive a Lincoln Continental Mark IV from 1974? Well, in a short phrase, you feel like the man. It's very floaty, steering is very, very vague. Visibility is decent, although it does have a pretty low roof line, so that does cut out your visibility in the front just a little bit. But I mean, this thing will make you stand up tall. This is an exuberant vehicle. If someone showed up at your front door in a Lincoln Continental in 1974, you're about to either make a business deal or swim with the fishes, and I hope it was the former rather than the latter. With that stuff out of the way, let's talk about the interior. Well, in front of me, I have 3 gauges. Off to the left, well, it's actually a clock. It's a Cartier clock, which was pretty popular in this era of cars, and there was even a Cartier edition of the Lincoln Continental in this era. Very cool to see. In the center, we have fuel and gear position, and off to the right, we have our speedometer and odometer. The steering wheel is nice and thin, although it does have the horn ring on it. I love that. And off to the left, we have a climate vent, headlight switches, and our climate controls. This was a very big 70s thing to have the climate controls actually off to the left. And I say 70s, also 60s and 50s cars as well. They put it over by the driver. It wasn't really till the late 70s, early 80s where we started to see the climate controls in the center. Kind of an interesting little note. Moving on to the door, we have power mirrors, window switches, seat tilts, and window locks. This does have power seats, which I'm still blown away by in 1974. Fully power seats. Very, very cool to see that. Moving into the center, we do get another climate vent along with a bunch of warning lights, our wipers, and a cigarette lighter. And then we have our Philco stereo with, of course, Kenny Rogers in the 8-track. Love, love, love to see that. Down below, we do have some added gauges. These are aftermarket as well as an aftermarket CB radio. And over across on the dash, we do have a Continental Mark IV badge. Absolutely love seeing that in vehicles like this. Now, the seats are incredibly comfortable. They're finished in this nice cream color that I love. And this is really the era of American comfort. I could take a nice long snooze in one of these bad boys and I wouldn't mind too much. Incredibly exquisite, comfortable seats, and I really enjoy them. However, throughout all of this interior, before we talk about the rear seats, we don't have any cup holders, so the 1974 Lincoln Continental Mark IV fails the big friggin' bottle test. So something really nice is that this actually has a mechanism. So you pull it down up here and then it actually like kind of stays in place. The Mustangs of the same era didn't have that. So that's very nice to see. Sliding in here is not graceful. This was a personal luxury car, so they put all their focus up front and not really back here. But with this door closed, bring this back up, I am very, very pleasantly comfortable in the back of the Mark IV. I have power windows back here and a light switch. I get to control my own lights. I get a light switch like a wall, like a normal human being, which is very, very cool to see. I do get a center armrest. I get to enjoy these little, I believe they're called opera windows, the little circular ones. You can correct me on that. I believe these are called opera windows. If not, let me know. But very cool to see out of them. You get the little Lincoln logo and whatnot. And overall, it's a very comfortable back seat. Is it graceful to get in and out of? No, of course not. But again, this was personal luxury. They also had the Continental Town Car, which was a 4-door, which was a lot easier to get into. Seen here, not the right era. I believe this was a 78 that you're seeing now that I filmed a couple years ago. So if you want that, you can seek one of those out. But this is, I mean, it's kind of cool to have 2 doors. It's, you know, it's big pimping. For all intents and purposes. Let's hop out. We'll take a quick look at the giant trunk. At least I think it's giant. I haven't opened it up yet, but let's see if it's giant, and then we'll talk about the looks. Pull this up. I always love it when old cars do this. They have that hidden badge. A lot of them lose their like little anchor so they won't stay up. They used to like hold like there, but as you can see, it's just been worn down after years and years and years. So let me try to do this one-handed. Excuse my editing. Round key. Pop it up like that, and of course, giant trunk in the Continental Mark IV. Absolutely love to see it. Of course, you got to show off all the goods. But this is what I love about this era of cars. Very, very large trunks, and something we don't really see much of anymore. We do have big trunk vehicles, but not huge. Here are the jacking instructions. Love seeing that on the old cars. And overall, just very, very cool around the back of a Lincoln Continental Mark IV. Now we got to talk about the looks, and I love the blue that this Continental is finished in. I also love the contrasting white seats to really help out that vibe. But honestly, to me, this doesn't look visually that different than a Mark V, and we'll talk about that in a second, but you can see they didn't change a whole lot. Of course, it does have those 5-mile-an-hour bumpers up at the front and rear, those big chunky bumpers we've come to know and love, and all Continental Mark IVs came with vinyl tops, which just adds to it a little bit. I think it looks pretty good, and overall, I'm just a big fan of how this vehicle looks. With the exterior, I do want to talk about the headlights. They have garage door headlights, which are wonderful, and they actually still work on this particular Mark IV. But it also has cornering lights, so when you turn on your turn signal, it'll actually shine a light in that direction so you can see your corner a little bit better. Really cool technology for 74. But with all of that being said, let's get on to my final thoughts. What do I think driving a 1974 Lincoln Continental Mark IV? Well, of course it's incredibly cool. This car is in really good condition for its age, and for being a Midwestern car, you gotta factor that in. It's a really nice driving car. But I wanted to talk about the oil crisis, A, because I'm obsessed with it, but B, because this vehicle is a product of it. So the oil crisis happened in 1973, changed the automotive world forever. If you're really curious about it and don't know much about the oil crisis, I do have a full video essay on my channel that I'll also link at the end of this video. But basically, it wasn't cool anymore to have an inefficient vehicle. So, on paper and from consumers, this car ended up getting killed off. The next generation, the Mark V, still had the 7.5 liter, but it was an option. The standard engine was made smaller to the 6.6 liter, and the 7.5 was canceled altogether in 1979. In the 80s, it dropped below 5 liters of displacement, and they even had a diesel inline 6 option. Again, I'll leave that video at the end as well. And then into the 90s, it dropped again into the 4.6. So the downsize had started after this generation of Continental. And that was because of the oil crisis. It killed off cars like this. But at the same time, it didn't kill this car off. Yes, 1973 saw a big drop in sales for 1974. Close to 12,000 fewer Continentals were sold after the oil crisis began. But then it held its own. In 1974, they sold 57,000. In 75, they sold 47,000, and in 76, they were back up to 56,000. The oil crisis tried to kill this car, but consumers still wanted them. So the argument of, oh, people didn't want big cars, they wanted small cars, is still true, but it didn't apply to the luxury owner. People that wanted Lincoln Continentals still wanted the big engine. They still wanted the big floaty automobiles. And the oil crisis is why in the 80s, we got vehicles like the Cadillac Cimarron, a 4-cylinder Cadillac. But this car held true. This car stuck to its guns, and people responded by continuing to buy them just as they were. There wasn't this public outcry. There weren't pickets in the streets to cancel the Continental. The Continental lived a lot longer than just the oil crisis, into the 2000s and 2010s, only being recanceled in 2020. So love it or hate it, you gotta respect this car. It held on to what it knew, and it didn't waver when gas prices shot up and emissions went up too. But I personally love and respect the Continental Mark IV. Huge thank you to Elijah for letting me take out his Continental. This is such an amazing car. So thankful that he let me take it out and drive more Malaise metal. He's been absolutely wonderful to work with, and I can't thank him enough. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to rate the video, comment on the video, and subscribe if you really liked it. Take care, guys.